interesting thing about the Mercury retrograde is that usually, at least for me, and everybody's different, the effects hit you right off the bat. Like, Mercury retrograde starts September 9th, which is this coming Friday.
Yes.
And usually, like, that first week is the most intense in terms of when I feel the effects.
Right, because you're like, it's brand new, it's
boom.
just hit you, and everything
explodes.
starts to go crazy.
Basically, Mercury is the planet that rules communication. So you can look at it as a retrograde is going to affect the ways in which we communicate. So first and foremost, the direct lines of communication between humans can be affected. We often miscommunicate to one another in those times. You might say something and it might be misinterpreted or misconstrued by somebody. Also, things like textual communication,
Right.
reread everything that you send, because oftentimes words might be switched, especially with voice text. You might be sending something that has a totally different sound as what you intended.
Think twice before you use that emoji as well.
Yes. So that level of communication is often affected. In the business sense too, it's the idea of like rereading everything that you're sending, document-wise, emails, and just make sure that what you're intending is being communicated properly.
Proofread.
Proofread.
Edit.
And then also this other really interesting thing, and this is, new to our world of technology. Technology is affected. True story. Working at the clothing store, we have a POS system, which is hooked up to the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we ring up customers. Without fail, usually the first few days of the retrograde, the system shuts down. I'm not kidding you. It's happened every time, and it's a joke. I'm like,
God,
it's Mercury retrograde. But it is true. And so that's also something that is affected strongly, is this idea of the world of the communication and internet and that level of breakdown with technology.
I noticed that the last Mercury retrograde, I noticed that with my work computer, my connection to it's a MiFi, so I connect to the cell service. And I remember when Mercury retrograde started, it was like a whole week, and it kept shutting down and it just disconnecting for no reason.
Absolutely.
It was charged, everything was fine, but it just kept shutting down and then restarting. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I think you sent something to me about like how to deal with Mercury retrograde, and I'm like, oh God, that's why.
Yeah, and it's a real thing. I mean, it's a real deal. And the idea of, handling retrograde season, because it can be considered a season, because and to take it a little bit deeper beyond just the actual dates of the retrograde, there's what they call a shadow before and after. And remember, I had sent you and Kristen a message about it. So there's this period of time which is like 2 weeks before a retrograde and 2 weeks after, in which there's a shadow. So it's like the slow build up to the actual retrograde itself, when you can start feeling those little glitches. And then when the retrograde happens, that's when that's when it hits you. Another really interesting phenomena that happens in Mercury retrograde is that it often will inspire you to think about people, friends, family, loved ones from your past, perhaps people you don't communicate with anymore. And there's this also kind of like a little joke, like, retrograde will make all your exes text you, or you might want to text your exes, but that is also a very true thing as well.
Well, I actually did do that, but it's because it was his birthday, so I had to say happy birthday. Is it because it's really retrograde, and that's...
It could have been.
I'll blame retrograde.
But it's the fact that the idea of a retrograde is this idea behind the, planets, Earth, everything move in a continuous direction. But the idea of a retrograde is it's our perception from our placement is that the planet is actually moving
Backwards in the sky.
in the sky. It's not actually moving backwards, but it's our perception.
Right.
But the idea behind that backwards motion is also the idea of going backwards in your head to the past.
Right, that
and
backwards, the visual representation in the sky still affects our brains, and it still makes us go back in time.
Yes.
With, texting exes on their birthdays or
For
whatever.
For sure. And actually, I'm curious because this retrograde is starting in Libra. So Mercury right now is stationed in Libra. I'm a Libra, so I'm really curious to see how this affects me because I feel as though for as long as I've been paying attention to this element, I don't know that it's ever been in my sun sign.
Oh, okay. So this is a first.
This will be interesting.
This will be interesting to see how
I'm going
that
to take
affects.
notes.
Well,
I'll report back.
Yeah, and for me, I know it starts in Libra and it ends in Virgo, which I'm a Virgo, and that means that. So does that mean that maybe later in retrograde is when I'm going to feel it more?
Let's take notes.
Let's take notes
and report back.
We will take notes and report back.
Because every experience is unique, obviously,
yes.
Because we're in this constant level of movement, so nothing's going to be the same twice, right?
Of course not.
But we shall see, because it's in Libra. Even if Libra is not really necessarily in like your big three, meaning your sun sign, your moon sign, or your rising sign, Libra is the sign of balance. So that's telling me that it's just going to throw
things
you
are going to
off
be
of balance. And that's essentially what a Mercury retrograde does. But just being in the sign of Libra, which is representing this idea behind seeking balance, that's going to throw us off of our equilibrium and our balance.
Right.
So,
and it might when it's in Virgo later on, it might just we may not be perfect anymore.
No, and then we're going to be so upset that we're not perfect.
It's going to
drive us bonkers.
Right. Oh gosh. Okay, so we need to be prepared for that.
Yes. So how do we prepare?
How do we prepare? Other than having beverages.
We have wine.
Okay.
First and foremost. I would say waking up and practicing some kind of a grounding type of just action for yourself. I know, just something simple. It could just be waking up, standing up, taking a nice deep breath, and just recognizing that one deep breath, an inhale and an exhale, connecting to yourself, connecting to the present moment. Something that simple, but just starting your day off with that intention, because I know for me, the retrograde has a tendency to kind of, it takes you out of so much that I have a tendency struggling with focus, period. But
don't we all?
That's a great way to keep yourself focused.
Yeah, well, that's intentional focusing.
The intentional focusing, the intentional grounding.
Yeah.
Also, as simple as it sounds, just being barefoot outside, putting your feet to the earth.
Oh.
If you have the benefit of being this close to an ocean, put your feet in the sand,
take a walk
salt
on the
water,
beach.
Things like that.
But even if not, like if you have a yard with grass, standing in the grass, I bet would be great.
Absolutely.
Or just even standing. Just take a walk outside.
Whatever the
ground is.
Feel the earth beneath your feet, because that is just very stimulating for the body and for the mind.
Well, in my case, it's a patio, and the concrete is warm, and so I can feel that. Sometimes that feels like a good energy coming up into my feet.
The warmth. But remember, though, concrete would not be considered earth.
I know it's not. But if it's the best you've got,
if it's the best you got, it's the best you got.
Yeah.
Even just being outside and connecting to the sky. Looking up to the sky, taking in the deep breaths of the air outside, the trees. I mean, all of that. Just connecting to earth and nature.
Yeah.
But the idea of, this is pushing it really far, but I know we rely so heavily on our phones and technology, and if something were to happen to our technology, we feel so out of control.
Yeah.
So the idea of maybe just pushing your phone to the side when you don't need it, and really just allowing yourself to have that opportunity to connect to yourself and your surroundings. Being present in the moment, being grounded. Also, burning sage is a great way to cleanse yourself of any negativity, your surroundings, and also a great tool to ground yourself. burning sage, burning incense.
And do you just do that? How would you do that? Would you just do that for a minute with an intention, or?
Well, in terms of sage, I like to light the sage and put it in my abalone bowl so I don't burn anything.
Right.
And allow the sage to burn until its completion. So let it burn. You can bring it up to yourself to kind of take it in. But sometimes I like just sitting it down and seeing where it goes.
Letting it do its thing.
Because if I put a burning sage between us, I mean, we're outside, so the wind's going to take it
Right.
in a different direction, of course. But if you're inside, is it going over more towards you? Is it coming over more towards me? Is it going to a particular spot in the house?
Where is it going?
Exactly, and just kind of being mindful and watching the sage in that way.
I like that. Letting it
Let it burn its course.
It's guiding. It's guiding
Yes.
you. Instead of the other way around.
I never like to put sage out because it just feels like you're cutting off something that's really beneficial. So let the sage do its thing.
Let the sage do its
The
thing.
longer it burns, the more it knows that it needs to cleanse the space or to cleanse you.
Indeed.
But yeah, the act of saging alone is great for cleansing and purifying. So grounding, maybe taking space from your own technology a little bit, and focus on intentional deep breaths and just being present in the moment. Always great advice.
That is. And
For any day.
right, it doesn't have
of
to
the
be
year.
retrograde to do those things, but this is a great time to do that.
Very, very important during retrograde. And also at night, if you have the opportunity, I mean, as silly as it sounds, I love going out at night and just getting yourself in the position of knowing what your surroundings are, knowing where the moon is at any given time, knowing
Right.
where your planets are. Last night, I noticed Saturn right here,
Up here?
Jupiter's rising.
Okay.
So just knowing where all your planets are.
Learn where you are on Earth.
Learn where you are.
And in the galaxy, really.
And
that's kind of what you're looking
that's
at.
That's
the
offering
galaxy.
you a grounding,
Yeah.
in a sense, too.
'Cause
You're
it's
grounding yourself to Earth.
Right. You're really finding your place not just in your house or your town. You're finding your place in the universe
Yes,
when you look at the skies above you.
absolutely.
It's also quite lovely up there.
It is. So the moral of our story is
Ground.
ground and understand that things often feel more difficult in a retrograde.
Patience with that is
Patience.
going to be very important.
Understanding, and take the time to think about your voice and how you're communicating, and is your message being heard in the correct way?
Yes.
Because it's all about that
Communication.
direct, whether it be face to face, direct phone to phone, email correspondence,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Well, and I think also an extension of that too, be gentle if someone does misconstrue you.
Mhm.
So even if you try your best and your words still get misconstrued, be gentle with that person when they kind of react in a way that you weren't expecting,
Exactly.
because they're doing their best too.
Yeah. And know that this might also be a time in which you may have to explain yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, there you have
Be
it.
prepared to explain yourself.
Be prepared to explain yourself. Cool.
All right.
All right. Cheers. I tried to type in hortense. Don't even ask what it changed it to.